Just the other day, I was paddling across Wastwater in my kayak, discussing with my eldest grandchild some of the wonders of creation. Now, if you're not familiar with Wastwater, it's to be found in Wasdale, in the western part of the Lake District. Of course, this is still true even if you are familiar with it. Well, at 43 fathoms, or 258 feet, it is the deepest lake in England and stretches for almost 3 miles to the foot of England's highest mountain, Scafell Pike. Well, enough of such trivia. The lake is surrounded by mountains and is arguably the most scenic of all the lakes within the Lake District. In fact, a few years ago, it was voted on national television as Britain's favourite view. It truly is simply stunning. Well, as I was saying, I was paddling across Wastwater in my kayak, discussing with my eldest grandchild some of the wonders of creation. At 5 years of age, she's beginning to grasp some of the wonders of this world, and our conversation moved on to Jesus and his friends, some of whom were fishermen, and spent time on a big lake like this. We didn't say any more of the geographic or historic context of these things, even though her grasp of humanities and social sciences is rapidly increasing. But the setting of the lake itself seemed sufficiently appropriate to venture forth into this arena. And then I told her of the time when Jesus walked on the water, when he actually walked on the water. Oh, there was a brief moment of silence, and from the back of my kayak I heard this "Wow!" There followed some clarification on the matter and assurances that no paddle boards were involved, nor any kayaks, nor any other flotation devices. But the whole idea seemed to her to be absolutely amazing. How on earth, if you'll excuse the possible irony, how on earth could anyone walk on water? Everyone knows that that sort of thing just doesn't happen. And so the next questions at some point must be along the lines of, who is this Jesus of Nazareth? What sort of person must he be to do things like this? Well, all of this got me thinking about our response to the extraordinary or the unexpected, and how easy it seems to be for us to become used to things which once were simply amazing. And then this led me to think about the relationships between seeing and hearing and believing and the nature of our faith. Many years ago, when my own children were young, I used to put on magic shows for their birthday parties. I had long enjoyed the art of conjuring since I was a lad myself, and this was an ideal way to avoid what I thought were the extravagant charges of children's party entertainers, whom we soon learned were very much the order of the day. Indeed, it wasn't terribly long until I was being asked to perform at some of my children's friends' parties, and so was able to enjoy some of these extravagant charges myself. Well, fast forward 30 years, and just a few months ago I was asked to perform yet again, but this time at the birthday party of my aforementioned granddaughter. I should hasten to add that I have never considered adding walking on the water to my repertoire, and nor do I intend to do so, but I do remember learning a most valuable lessons all those years ago. Along with providing essential entertainment at a good number of birthday parties for a number of years, I was also asked to perform at the annual Christmas party for the village preschool. Now, at the time I was first asked, I hadn't read the useful advice about performing for children under the age of 5. And the advice is quite simple. Don't do it. Now, I'm not sure whether that would have actually stopped me, but I quickly learned that the younger the children were, the less they appreciated the unexpected or the inexplicable. It wasn't much use, simply sort of making things appear or changing things into other things or pushing a pencil through a solid coin or restoring a torn up £5 note. A young child who hasn't yet worked out how things are supposed to happen might simply assume that those sorts of things were quite normal. Having not yet worked out all that is ordinary in life, the extraordinary is far less spectacular. I mean, a very young child might look at a man walking on the water and think nothing of it. Presumably that's what people do, or at least that's what some people do, or at least that's what people from Nazareth do, or something like that. But once children begin to learn the way in which the world around them actually works, then any aberration or anything extraordinary will seem most peculiar. And hopefully it will demand further examination in search of some sort of explanation. And that's why, as the children grow older, we might find ourselves desperate to know just how it's done, knowing that there has to be some sort of explanation. One night, many, many years ago, in the city of Jerusalem, there was a man who came to Jesus looking for some sort of answers. His name was Nicodemus, and he was a very influential chap within the Jewish aristocracy. You'll find his story near the beginning of John's Gospel. Well, he comes to Jesus by night, and he says to him, "Rabbi," teacher, "we know that you are a teacher come from God, for no one can do these signs that you do unless God is with him." Now, we don't know which signs Nicodemus and his companions had seen, but they were sufficient to persuade them that there was no earthly physical explanation that made any sense. To them, all the evidence pointed to a heavenly origin, persuading them that God was clearly with this teacher from Nazareth. Well, the discussion that followed had to do with origins and the need for people to be born anew if they are to enter the kingdom of God, a need that is as real today as it was then. And though Nicodemus didn't really understand these things, he did recognize that Jesus was someone extraordinary, unlike anyone he had ever met before. Towards the end of his gospel, John tells us that Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. And today, we have heard what was written and have come to believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. But sometimes I wonder just how much have we believed? How much of this have we truly grasped in our understanding? I mean, we know that Jesus turned water into wine. We know that he healed the sick. We know that he fed the multitudes with a few loaves and fish. We know that he walked on the water. And we know these things because we've read of them, we've heard of them through what has been written. But isn't it all too easy for the things which we have heard and the things which we've read to become little more than words in our ears or letters on the page? Intellectually or mentally, we know them to be true, but somewhere along the way, it seems that sometimes we might have lost, the wow factor. I'm not suggesting that every time we read about Jesus walking on the water, we should, leap up from our seats and run around the room shouting, wow, as if we'd never heard of such a thing before. But I do wonder whether we've maybe heard the stories so many times that we haven't sometimes begun to take them for granted. I wonder whether we've become so accustomed to the miraculous signs of Jesus that we might forget just how extraordinary he is. We've come to expect the unexpected, and of course we can so easily explain the inexplicable. In fact, we could argue that turning water into wine, healing the sick, feeding the multitudes, raising the dead, and of course walking on the water, we could argue that these things are actually rather normal. Normal, that is, for one who is the very Son of God himself. Of course he can do these things. How absurd to think otherwise. And though all these things may be as they are, none of this should be allowed to undermine the wonder of it all. none of this should make us not want to say, wow. So, like you, I'm sure, like you, I've spent time in deep thought. I've wanted to see Jesus walking on the water. I've wanted to put myself in the shoes of the Jews who witnessed these things firsthand. I want to see the empty tomb where once his body lay, and I want to see the mark of the nails in his hands. I want these things to be as real to me as if I had seen them with my own eyes. And yes, I know that Jesus said to Thomas, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." But still, I want to feel as if I had seen. It's one thing to know that they happened, but it's something else to believe wholeheartedly that these things took place among those who lived so long ago. I mean, can we taste the wine? Can we smell the loaves and the fish? Can we hear the joy, the shouts of joy of those who've been healed? Can we see the figure of a man walking on the water in the midst of the storm? Then we can say, wow. And we can say, wow, not only for these extraordinary wonders, but because they point to things that are quite literally out of this world, things of another unseen realm. They point us to the things of God. And may we never, never, ever take for granted the things of God. This, I am persuaded, is one of the reasons why we need to think constantly about the things of God. We need to dwell on his word, and we need for him to dwell in our hearts through faith. Living and walking with God is far from the mundane existence of most who walk this earth. To live and to walk with God is to live each day with a real sense of wonder. It's to see the things around us in a completely different light. It's to experience life in all of its fullness and to share with God the joy of his salvation. And that is something about which to say, wow. The day is coming, and what a glorious day it will be. The day is coming when we will leave this life behind, and when all that for which we have hoped will be realized. On that day, there's not one of us that will not be saying, wow, wow, and wow over and over again. Maybe there's been something here for us to think about today. Let me close with words written to believers in Corinth all those years ago. Words that will never grow old. So we do not lose heart. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. May God be with us all. Let us draw near to him with a true heart in full assurance of faith. And may we look forever toward that day when we shall see him as he is, when together we shall look at him in wonder and be truly amazed by the glory of his presence. Thank you